one goal against Carolina, you have a good chance of winning and getting points off of them. So they're starting to change the way they play out of the back even. And their midfield is staying a little deeper. So now there's less players high up the field.
If you bring Julie Ertz to the World Cup, you're bringing a player with a limp who played in only 58 minutes against Chicago. She will not be able to give you a full 90. And if she does, it's not going to be the Julie Ertz that we knew 2 years ago. We have to bring players to the World Cup who can give us their all, a full 90 minutes.
The TST was phenomenal, and I think we got to see some really good soccer players and the whole time I was there, I was like, how is this guy how are people not looking at this player? Like, how do we not know how do I not know about this player?
Now they're back together as one, and it's not entertaining enough for me. Golf is a good sport. I enjoy playing it, but I need that off the course drama to make it really entertaining. So yeah, I'm a little disappointed. Welcome into Straight from the Pitch, joined as always by my co-host Scotty Schweitzer. I'm Anna Witte. We're going to start with NWSL news straight from the top. North Carolina Courage dropped to 7th place after losing to Kansas City in Kansas City Saturday night. They're the only team in the league that are starting to fall after Chicago gets a win and obviously Kansas City gets a win. The biggest thing, Scotty, that we've talked about a few times now is North Carolina is struggling to finish. They had 7 shots, only 1 shot on target in the second half against Kansas City. So the question is, how do they start creating the chances to be able to find goals in the back of the net with only 10 goals in 10 games so far?
Yeah, we've talked about it at length, I feel like, on this show, that they really move the ball around. They're really good in the midfield. I do feel, though, and they've had the same starting midfield for a while now, their midfielders are basically all sixes. In a sense, they keep the ball moving. They're good link up. They move well. They connect well, good together. They're good link ups with the outside backs, getting forward. They're always there, compact. They're good defensively. But when they get into that final, and I don't even know if you want to say final third, maybe final 25 yards, final 30 yards, they really have no answers for anybody's defensive shape, and they have very limited ideas, imagination with their runs. And I heard Sean Neha speak after the last game, and he's saying, we're doing well. We don't want to change the way we play. We just have to be better in the final third. And that it came across to me as that's just something coaches say because there's been no change in the final third. The runs are very stagnant. The runs are very straight. They don't really come out of their position. Usually it's one of their wingers, Caroline or Lucy, crossing the ball into the other 2 forwards. There's no midfield help. The midfield seems to be too far back. Not even, we talked about earlier, maybe you could lay balls back to the top of the 18 and get some shots. There's not even players there anymore. And I think part of that is, and I've been on teams where we were very defensive minded in our shape. We always started out defensively first, and we knew we would get goals. But as the season wears on and you're not getting goals, things start to happen in the back that normally don't happen. We get a little nervous. I always say to young players, defenders and offensive players are treated basically exactly opposite. If I have a game and I stop a player 30 times in a row and he beats me one time and gets a goal, I had a bad game as a defender. If I'm a forward and I get 30 shots and miss all 30 and then score on my 31st shot, what a great game I had as a forward. So that mentality starts to weigh on you as a player. Like in the last game against Kansas City, Fox was one of their good options going forward. She was getting higher up the pitch. She was getting wide. She was coming into the middle. You could see in that game, she is less likely to come forward because one goal, one mistake, North Carolina feels, man, we're in trouble because it's hard to get goals. They're not getting goals. So one goal against Carolina, you have a good chance of winning and getting points off of them. So they're starting to change the way they play out of the back even. And their midfield is staying a little deeper. So now there's less players high up the field. But I think it all stems with they need to get into practice and get forwards to be making different runs because a good team, when you watch a really good team play, they'll have different players getting forward, which means their forwards become midfielders, sometimes even backs. But that's allowed to happen. With Carolina, they're pretty much in their spots all the time. Where they do move and do get into new positions is basically just in possession. So there's that old saying, possession for the sake of possession, and that's, it seems like, what Carolina's turning into. Because one shot on frame is not going to win any game. I will say this. When Wingate comes into the game, she does cause a bit of havoc because she's so intense in her runs and she's so dynamic getting forward so fast. She does cause a bit of problems, but she usually only plays 20 minutes, 15 minutes at the end of the game, where teams have either settled in and are now defending better, or the game's kind of got its way and it's a little bit easier to defend her. But yeah, you're right. There is no creativity offensively for them as a unit, because Caroline can create on her own. She does stuff. So like when Caroline gets the ball, if you watch the teams play against them, they'll have that one pressure and then they'll have a really close cover because she doesn't always look to get the pass off to the players centrally. She's trying to do things on her own. So that's they keep the ball, they move the ball. That's great. They get out of their back. They play a good brand of possession, but it doesn't result in any chances on goal. It doesn't result in any dynamic movements up top. And just to say we got to be better in the final third, better, of course you have to be better. You really have nothing in the final third. And that's that. I think teams are starting to figure that out. And once you figure that out about a team and you have less fear against them, you can defend a little bit differently. And I think we're going to start seeing teams start to press a little bit more because they're not going to be so worried as long as their back four can stay pretty much compact, because it's always 4 against 3.
In Kansas City, they went with a 5-back in the game against North Carolina, and they had Haley Mace on Tyler Lucy, and Kate Delfalva did a really good job with Caroline on the other side. And like you said, Scotty, it's like they were pretty predictable on their runs. Lucy would receive the ball out wide, and Mace is such a good defender that she would track it down, she'd win it, she'd play it forward. So Kansas City knew going into this game how to slow down Caroline and Tyler Lucy. Neither one of them had a shot on goal in this game. Victoria Pickett was the player who had a shot on goal. Now, we talk about bench players and players making an impact coming off the bench. North Carolina's in a really good position with their bench. Kansas City doesn't have that luxury right now due to injuries. North Carolina put Tess Bodie on, who's coming off the injured reserve list, who I thought had a great game. She just changed things up and made things less predictable for North Carolina. Victoria Pickett, Nahas has been pretty vocal about getting her up to speed with the fitness and then getting her better involved in what they want to do as a team, which I completely understand. It's what they do does take a few practices and probably a few games to get up to speed. But I think she's a great addition to their midfield and to their attack. But Tyler Lucy, Caroline, very specifically, Caroline's always been the one player who in like broadcasts and whenever people talk about the team, it's like she is the person they need to stop. And North Carolina has to stop being predictable in that way and make it be somebody else. Rather that's Narumi, Tyler Lucy. Can it be Emily Fox getting forward a little bit more numbers instead of Caroline? To mention more numbers, I mean, North Carolina had 521 accurate passes and they possessed 67% of the game. Those are great numbers, but they have to be with a purpose. So for North Carolina, it's getting maybe some of those injured players back into the starting 11, maybe getting Tess Bodie back into playing higher minutes, maybe seeing how she does this weekend after a good performance against Kansas City. The other thing, too, is I think teams are noticing like North Carolina will possess, so they drop back defensively and they keep the game in front of them, let them have the ball, and then in transition moments, they win it and they go try and score against the Courage. So if the Courage can figure out that one piece, maybe they can start getting things kind of on the same track and start scoring goals, because 5-game unbeaten streak, that's a good record. But the game against Kansas City showed how predictable they can be.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Bodie and you mentioned Pickett. And I agree with you. Those are two very good players. Bodie is in a little bit different category for me because when she comes in, I think there's not enough game film on her from this year. So that's a little helpful for them against other teams because you haven't seen her play. She doesn't fool around. She likes to get to goal. She likes to get right after it. She gets at you. Pickett, who I do really think is a good player, and I even said she might be the 10 that they need. The problem is when she comes in, now they don't have 3 6s and they lose a bit of their possession through the midfield, because when they have Speck and the Japanese girl and O'Sullivan in there, when they're all in there, they're a lot tighter. They're a lot more compact. They're really close. They're within 7 yards of each other, a nice little triangle. Well, Pickett is a more offensive player, so she gets higher up and attached to the 9 better. But because of that, they get a little stretched. And as the season's gone and the scoring hasn't happened, we are seeing their defenders are slowly coming forward instead of coming forward as fast as they were earlier in the year. Because I've been on teams where we were, like I said, we were a defensive team. I think we still hold the record of only giving up 15 goals in a season, but we didn't score a lot of goals. And there became this animosity between the backs and the forwards because the pressure was getting so big on us to not give up goals because we knew they were going to be 1-0 games, 2-1 games. They were going to be really tight games. We weren't going to get a lot of goals. We just weren't scoring. It wasn't like we weren't creating chances. We were. This team isn't even creating chances. And that's where the problem lies. If we're creating chances and we're missing, okay, that's like, let's get some better finishing. But this team, like you said, they're super predictable in that final third. There's not much dragging defenders out of position, crisscrossing defenders, making confusion for defenders. Who's going to pick up? Who's going to leave? Who's not going to? Who's going to step? Who's going to stay? There's not a lot of that. They just hold their ground, hold their lines, hold their lanes, and they're picking off passes, and they're not even getting chances. And at the end, they got the game got a little crazy at the end because Kansas City, like you said, they don't have a big bench. So they were tired. So they sat a little even deeper, and they were getting chances off of deflections and things like that. Not because they actually created, more that Kansas City was letting them have more of the field than earlier in the game.
If you were coaching this North Carolina team and they have Tess Bodie, they have Victoria Pickett, they have O'Sullivan, Speck, Narumi can play in the midfield, what three pieces would you put in there to play that possession style that you think would be the most effective to connecting the three lines?
Well, I personally, I think Speck's a good player, but I think she needs to come off the bench. She's a player where you need to bring her off the bench because of situational play in the game. We're winning. Or do we need her engine? We're losing. And then if I put her in and say, look, I don't need you sitting back. We're losing. We need you higher up. You're almost going to defend right behind the nines in a sense. I do like Pickett. I just think part of the reason they're so good at possession is the way teams are going to play against them. They're going to allow them to have a lot of possession. To knock the ball side to side does nothing to the other team unless when we play possession is not to move the ball. The possession is to move the opponent. And that's where the problem lies. They move the opponent, but only in the final third on their side, maybe up to midfield. Once they get across midfield, they move side to side, but with no purpose going forward and no purpose looking for the splits, the breaking of the lines. And we all talk about it, but they very rarely break lines in the final 30 yards. It's more side to side, and then okay, we get Caroline isolated, and she tries to do 1v1, but that's okay because there's 4 backs normally, sometimes 5 backs. Kansas City play with 5, so you beat them. You have your pressure, you have your cover, you have your balance, and you're still marking the only 2 forwards in the box. So it has to be so precise to work. Whereas the game before, when Carolina won 2-1. They were chasing the game. Carolina got out wide because the other team was trying to get back into the game. Whereas Kansas City's not chasing the game. They're in the lead. And at that moment, a tie is actually good for them the way their season was going. So they got lucky. They got the win. But they were good with sitting back, killing the game, knowing, shoot, they haven't scored many goals all year. So even if they get one, they're probably not getting 2, and we already have ours. Like, to get a goal in the 8th minute and then hold on the whole game, Carolina needed to make some changes, I think, a little bit earlier because as we're seeing, like you said, in the standings, listen, Angel City lost the game. So for me is like there needs to be a change in Angel City. I don't know if players are playing in the wrong position, but this group, that Kansas City's now won, Chicago's now won. The numbers are getting closer. They're at 9. Carolina's now in 7th place. Like, you don't want to throw games away because it's such a good league. It's so compact. The numbers are so tight that you just can't be, and you can't be throwing points away, and you have to just keep getting better and better and building momentum. Listen, Gotham lost to San Diego, but Gotham's dangerous. They're a good team too. Washington, they changing up. San Diego, you see Washington and San Diego, to me, I really like watching them because they make real good tactical adjustments every single game. They do not play the same way. Listen, if Portland's playing the same way, you say go for it. You're in first place, until they can beat it, keep doing it. But even Portland makes minor little tactical adjustments. Some of Carolina doesn't seem to have made many tactical adjustments as the year's gone. And if you keep doing that in a league that only has 12 teams, we're all going to know what you're looking to do.
Right. Chicago is the team that North Carolina faces this upcoming weekend. Chicago beat Angel City. I think they've started to figure out their attack and lean into their grittiness style. However, on the defensive side for Chicago, I think that's the weakest point in the league. And that's where North Carolina can start testing some different things against a backline who's coming back from injury and has struggled taking care of the details this season. So this game against Chicago in the attack could be where North Carolina can try and change things up and make things look a little bit different. That'll be a really good test for the Courage this weekend. Staying in the NWSL, more specifically in Angel City, Ertz started in her fourth game of the season against Chicago Monday night. She has 5 more matches if she is made available until the World Cup, which means 9 potential matches for Julie Ertz if we see her on the World Cup roster. Is that enough games to see if she is ready to go to Australia and New Zealand?
It's 9 games if we are naming our team right before they leave.
Right.
So the 9 games really is 4 or 5 of those games are just going to be fitness. She's either made the team or didn't make the team in a sense. For me, watching last night, and don't get me wrong, I am an Ertz fan. I've always been an Ertz fan. But what I saw last night, and she didn't play bad. I don't think she played bad, but I think Coffey's better than her. I think O'Sullivan's better than her. There's better players than her. If this is where she's at, and a lot of times when I was a pro, they were always like, you go do your contract or whatever, and all the coaches and GMs would always say, we're not paying you based on potential. And I would always say, actually, that is exactly what you're paying me for. Even if I'm an all-star, you don't know what I'm going to be the next year. You're just using a previous gauge to think that I'm going to be good again and again. For me, the previous gauge on Ertz is from 2 years ago. And listen, it wasn't, she had a slight injury, not a super bad injury, but she had an injury and then she had a pregnancy. I don't know any player, even without any injury, that takes 2 years off and comes back and gets right back to the way they were. I mean, and she went through an injury, slight injury to her knee, then she had her pregnancy, and now she's back. But 2 years is a really, really long layoff. So, like, if we're bringing her with us to the World Cup as a guest in a sense. Like, we don't know what she's going to, and whereas Portland's starting to click along, Coffey's starting to take care of her business, Washington.
DeMello, Savannah DeMello, shoot.
DeMello, well, DeMello's more of an offensive.
She's more attacking,
player, but I agree. Like last night, I think it was like in the 22nd minute of the game, something happened where Ertz got caught deep. And what happened was they moved, Johnson slid to her right, Nielsen slid to her left and high, and basically became the left back. And Julie Ertz was playing center back. Now, I remember for me when she was Julie Johnson and kind of jumped on the scene, she was really playing center back for the national team and gradually started moving into the 6th spot as they solidified their back line at the national team. For me, and I'm not saying bring her as a center back at all, but I'm saying if I'm Angel City, I'm looking to put her at center back. It gets because last night, she's usually the captain. When starts with a W. Sorry,
Weatherholt, Danny Weatherholt.
She was on the bench. Like Angel City's bench was amazing. LaRue comes in, does what she needs to do. Thompson, I don't know why Thompson's not starting. I don't understand that one single bit. And then Weatherholt comes in, like the game changed. They got their goal. They got back in the game. They started to control the tempo of the game. Ertz wasn't bad, but she didn't really do much either. She gets high, whereas they were kind of disjointed. I thought when she was in the back, and she was back there for like 5 minutes, the game kind of changed a little bit for Angel City, and they got more of the flow. Then she went back into the midfield, and then the game switched back, and Chicago got more of it. And I think you're right. Chicago's figuring out, and it's sometimes really good as a team to know the other team's better than us. It's okay. We can still win. We just have to be real good on, and they talked about it at halftime. They know when they get free kicks, they got to take advantage of free kicks. It's one of their chances. It's one of their opportunities. They have to be really compact defensively. They went to 4 in the back last night. Their midfield is, I think, a good midfield, but they do get stretched at times. And for Carolina next week, if you can stretch their midfield, great. But then you got to get midfielders to get beyond their midfield and get a part of the attack, which I think that's part of Carolina's problem is their midfield is doing really good, keeping the ball, but they don't get forward into the attack as much as they could. So they're always numbers down on the attack. But that's what I see with Angel City. For me, that team has too many players and are too talented to be where they are. And when you look at it like that, that comes down to one thing. That is coaching. And there has to be like they made 3 subs and you're like, what? How are these 3 on the bench? And you weren't mad that the players that started either. They deserve a start too. They're just too talented. And they're at home to a team like you're at home in Los Angeles playing Chicago, who can't find their way up until yesterday. And there was no urgency and desire in the beginning of that game to put their foot on their throats and just put them under and finish it off early. It was like, oh, whatever, we got this and we're playing. And it was just too calm for me. Like Angel City at home, man, you got to get after it.
And Angel City had a long week to prepare for it. It was a Monday night game. They had plenty of time to get ready for Chicago to come into their home. I think for that specifically too makes it more of a statement loss, and that Angel City has to start reevaluating everything. You get Sydney Leroux back, you have Julie Ertz in your midfield, you have Savannah McCaskill, Sarah Gord on your back line. Teams would kill for players like that. And those teams are doing well. They have a deep bench. Kansas City doesn't have that, and they're able to change things around. For Angel City, how are they going to come off of this game, play Washington Spirit this weekend, who you just mentioned, Scotty? Every single game, it's a small tactical change-up. That's a really tough game. It's the small details, the small 3 points here and there that teams have to take care of, because then they get themselves into a position where they're playing the tough teams. And that's where it's hard to get results. So if you can get the results against teams like Chicago, that's a win. Going back to the whole Julie Ertz thing and her potential with the World Cup, I agree. I think if you bring Julie Ertz to the World Cup, you're bringing a player with a limp who played in only 58 minutes against Chicago. She will not be able to give you a full 90. And if she does, it's not going to be the Julie Ertz that we knew 2 years ago. We have to bring players to the World Cup who can give us their all, a full 90 minutes with the full-on performance that we normally see from those players. Julie Ertz isn't going to be able to do that. Even if she plays 90 minutes in these next 5 games, I don't believe from what we've seen from her that she's going to be able to bring that level to the team. And I also say, talking about a locker room, having a player coming off of 2 years of not playing, then able to come to Angel City, play here and there, take 3 games off, play, start, whatever. If I were a player on the World Cup team and had been busting my butt for the last 4 years, I would be pretty frustrated that Julie Ertz would be able to step on to doesn't matter who she is, what kind of whatever leadership she brings to the team. I would be frustrated that a player like that comes in and a player like Sam Coffey is left behind.
I totally agree. And the other thing is, like I said, I'm an Ertz fan, and I think that's a great signing for Angel City. I think it's a great signing for Angel City. I think it's going to actually end up working out great. But there was 2 plays last night that were super significant to me. Julie Ertz is known for a couple things: her defensive prowess and attitude in the midfield, and her ability to win headers. Mm-hmm. And yesterday, a defensive header and an offensive header, she barely got off the ground to get it and that was her thing. It wasn't just she was strong and could body off a player. She could also get up. And 2 of them yesterday were just one I was almost comical, wow, she's been out a long time. She could barely even jump. She jumped, and she looks like me at 51 years old. Sometimes I jump, and I'm like, good God, I can't even slip a piece of paper on my feet. But, for me, that was, those are 2 of her things. And, there was no fear of her going into tackles. Usually players, you could see they kind of back out of their tackle when she's coming. They don't back out on tackles with her anymore. And then those 2 headers, I was like, wow, that was when we used to get corners, they're like, okay, this is a goal. This is Ertz time. Or when they get a corner, well, you're not scoring on us. We have Julie Ertz back there. Now, granted, on the goal, yes, Angel City. I mean, I'm done with this.
That was terrible. Yeah, I was going to say, the zonal thing.
Ridiculous. Listen, offensive teams on free kicks they know where they're going and they know where the ball is supposed to be going. The zone is like, you could see Angel City was like, is that mine? Is that yours? Is this? And then Ertz jumps late, doesn't get it, goes right over her head. Nobody's marking. Boom, goal. Like to me, is like, I don't know who came up with the zone theory, but it's ridiculous. They took an old theory of like three guys zoning, but even when I played and we zoned, the three guys that weren't marking, they were going to spots. They just didn't stand in their spot and wait for the ball. Like, we had runs and movements. I was a zone on the near post, then there was a zone in the middle, and then there was a zone on the back post. But we were going to specific spots to get there to because we know these are the dangerous three areas on the field on a corner kick or a free kick. Now there's like 8 people zoning and 2 people on the post. It's like there's like one person marking. To me, I don't know who came up with the idea, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And I'm pretty sure the national team does it too.
Attackers are too talented and too smart these days to be playing zonally. They find themselves in the right pocket. Like Ava Smith, she found the perfect spot that looked easy to get to, but it wasn't, and she didn't have anyone on her. I agree with the zonal defense. And it wasn't necessarily Julie Ertz's fault because it's zonal defense. She wasn't her mark, but she was the closest defender. So, in that
and when
instance,
you're zoning, and like I said, with 12 teams and everybody's watching each other, once I figure out, hey, Angel City's zoning, yeah, I can just say, okay, we're playing the ball into Cook. Everybody else, just run your lines and pick off all the zoners. So they basically are just standing still. Like, all I got to do, like, that's all they had to do. Like, a couple people went near post. Cook came late, came right to the 12. I mean, it's hard to mark as it is. And now when you're zoning, you don't get a hand on anybody. You don't get to bump an offensive player. You don't get to knock them off their path. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why coaches are doing it. I don't know why teams are doing it. And because it doesn't ever seem to work.
Something I'm going to try and dig into and see what that is all about this week. And Angel City's playing the Washington Spirit. If you're in LA, I'll be on that broadcast, so make sure to tune in. I'd be interested to see how Angel City bounces off this, especially now that they have Sydney Leroux back. Maybe that will give them a sense of confidence that they didn't have before with that experience on the field. And then in the midfield, are we going to see Julie Ertz again? That's going to be a big question mark. And for Angel City, they have to have more from Savannah McCaskill every single game. She is just such a statement for them in the midfield. And when she doesn't perform, Angel City doesn't win. So we have Washington Spirit, Angel City coming up this weekend. In MLS, we had a rivalry matchup that didn't live up to the expectations that Scotty wanted it to live up to. Seattle and Portland ended in a 0-0 tie. We had 5 ties last weekend. Out of 13 matches, 5 games ended in ties. So for this specific Cascadia rivalry match, Scotty, what wasn't good enough for you?
Everything. I was really, really disappointed. I mean, okay, first and these are 2 teams that aren't just MLS rivals. They are U.S. soccer, U.S. city rivals. Like, this is, like, I played in a league back in the A-League and the USL and everything, where Portland was still in it and the Seattle Sounders were still in it, and they hated each other. And it was always, that was huge game, and it was yellow cards and hard tackles. And I understand the game has changed. But you're going into this game, Seattle. You lost 4-1 last time you played Portland, who wasn't even playing well at the time and had a lot of injuries. Then you come here, and I'm pretty sure it's like 9 games in a row Portland has not lost in Seattle. Like, they haven't lost in Seattle. And, like, you got to own this rivalry, and then you got to own home turf. You got to own your home. So they came out, and it was like, it was just a game. It reminded me a couple years ago, a friend of mine coached a youth team, and he called me, and he had it on his phone. He's like, look at this. And it was 2 teams playing in a youth tournament, but if the 2 teams tied, they both went through. The other team that was playing in the group, they needed a win, and then they needed one of the teams to lose. Well, all they did was just knock the ball around in the midfield. Didn't really defend, didn't really try to go forward. That's what the Seattle game against Portland reminded me of. It was just, they had no answer for each other, but not really an answer. They had no questions for each other. They weren't even trying, it looked like, to get goals. They were both like, oh, let's not hurt let's Seattle and Portland do good. Let's both get a point this weekend and see if we can creep up the table. Like, it was just, I don't know. I was getting angry as I watched the game because both teams have talent. And then after the game, to watch the coaches like smiling and hugging each other, to me is like, I've never wanted a tie. I remember playing in trainings and the coach would be like, okay, time's up. We got to get in. And we were like, Coach, it's a tie. We can't play it to a tie in practice. And I think we talked about it earlier in the show. We used to go back to the hotel complex and get the teams back together and do something so we didn't tie, whether it was play cards, whether it was to do darts, was it a pool, ping pong, maybe play a game in the parking lot. Like, but we couldn't tie each other. Like, they were both happy with the tie, and not like there's good ties. A couple World Cups ago, Argentina played Holland, and it was a 0-0 tie, but it was like tackles in the penalty box and blocking shots, and it was attacking, and it was up and down, and it was box to box. This game was like played right in the middle of the park, right at the mid stripe, the stripe line. Like, it was just, there was nothing to it. It was like they didn't prepare for each other. They didn't want to hurt each other's feelings. That's what the game came across as. And these are two teams. Portland, through their defense, they get goals. Seattle, they have a high potent attack. They play, and I understand there's injuries, but look, we can't use injuries as excuses. Every team, every sport has injuries throughout the year. You're praying you don't have serious injuries when you're in the playoffs, when you're win or go home kind of time. But during the season, that's part of the game. That's what coaches have to do. You have to know your roster. You have to know who's – and Seattle's got a good bench also. So even when they have injuries, they still have good players that are playing. And when you make a little adjustments based on, well, this forward, that's a 9, plays a little different than this 9 for us. So we make this little adjustment. There was just nothing to this game. And listen, if I'm MLS, I'm having a word with these two teams, because this was a Fox game. This was a game on regular television. I don't have to have a package for it. And then that's what we get to watch. Like, people tuned in to see a battle, and this was not a battle. This was just like, hey, let's just get through these 90 minutes and then maybe, go get some fish together or something. I don't know what they were thinking.
Yeah. Go catch some salmon. I've done that before. Yeah. That's fun to do. No, I agree. And somebody on Twitter tweeted that the numbers to the OL Reign Portland game right after this MLS match were not good. They both played at Lumen Field this weekend, and they were in attendance, I guess that's a better way to put it. It's because, like you said it, Scotty, why would you want to stay, for another soccer game if the first game you watched wasn't great? And that's just –
I was planning on watching the OL Reign game. In Portland game. And I was disgusted by the first game, and I was like, I'm watching something else. I'm not watching – like, they're to me like Seattle, Portland, men, women. Like, you're connected. I'm not watching it. I was upset with the way that they attacked each other. Now, if you're talking Cincinnati or a team that defends the whole time, like that's their style of play, I would have got it. These are two teams that the way they play and their styles of play is to give us a good game. It's to give us, like, Portland. I like to watch Portland because they could win 4-1 and they could lose 4-1. This was 0-0 with nothing. It was. I don't mind a 0-0 game. I totally don't. But there's got to be something going back and forth here and there. Like, if it's just, good God, it's so good in the midfield, so many. There was nothing. There was like, they were walking in this game. There was this, the pace was slow. The attitude was slow. It looked like they didn't want to be there. They were indifferent to it, and that can't happen.
There was 11 shots for Portland, but only 2 shots on target, and Seattle had only 1 shot on target. There wasn't much action in that sense. Like, no good saves, no good attack. I'm not a fan of an MLS team or an NWSL team. When people ask me, like, who's my favorite soccer team, I don't have one. And it's obviously because I'm in this business and I always cheer for a good game and I want to see good action and I want to see players perform. However, I'm a big NFL fan. I'm a big hockey fan. I love the Hurricanes. And if I saw the Steelers and the Browns or the Steelers and the Ravens play in a game like that as a fan, I would be so pissed off. Especially the Ravens matchup. You want to see people hitting each other. That rivalry is so blue collar. And if you don't see players going after each other, if you don't see people smack talking each other post game, it's not what we set out for it to be. So I completely agree. Like, if you only have 2 shots on target, 1 shot on target for the other team, and then you're getting drinks after, that's not a good look for MLS. And that's not a good look for rivalries. And that's what MLS needs to continue to build their brand, is building on these rivalries, making them be something that people want to watch.
100%. I 100% agree. And when you bring up, like, the football, it should be the same in soccer to me. Like, you're not just you in the uniform. It's this city
Right.
versus this city. It's this metropolis versus this. It's like you got Pittsburgh, Steel City. Cleveland was a steel city. So it's like, who makes the better steel? Who plays the better football? And then, like, for me, I played in Cleveland. So, like, when I was in Cleveland my first year, Cleveland left and went to Baltimore. I remember how hurt the fans were, the people were. Man, when Cleveland plays Baltimore in football, I don't care how bad the Browns were over those. It was a good game. Someone was getting their helmet ripped off. Someone was getting a cheap shot tackle. But that makes the fans like, yeah, they care about us. They care about us. If I'm in Seattle or Portland after that game, I'm like, I'm disgusted with my team. Like, come on, man. They talk trash on us all the time. Or if I'm in Seattle, like they haven't lost at our building in 9 games. Like, that's a huge problem when it's our rival, our city rival, our close neighbor. Like, it had to be better. Like, I was fired up because I was excited. That was, oh, here's the big game. Great. Here's a rivalry. Here's like, this is going to be intense. There could be a red card. Like, I'm sorry, that's part of the game. There was nothing. There was nothing in the game. Just coaches like this on the sidelines. Like, do something, make a change, put somebody in there. Give me a spark plug, something.
When I was a kid, well, honestly, still now, watching Steeler Browns or Steeler Ravens games with my dad, I would like cheer for the hard hits. Obviously, I don't want to see people get injured, but my dad would be like, calm down, you're being a bit ridiculous. But I love it. And I think that's why, and not to track back, because we'll continue moving forward with some storylines, but that's why I love Denise O'Sullivan. I just love, you couldn't see on the broadcast, I was in Kansas City for the Kansas City, North Carolina game, but at the end of the game, like, she was shoving some Kansas City players, rather at halftime. She was shoving them in their face. Like, she wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She wasn't trying to get a yellow card, but she made it so funny that these Kansas City players were like so confused why she was, going up against them and actually like putting her hands on them. And I think just she brings such like an edge to the game that other people are scared to do. And she's so tiny. I think she's 5'1" at best, 99 pounds soaking wet. So that makes it even more fun. Huge Denise O'Sullivan fan. Anywho, some storylines that we've been covering along in the podcast that we're just going to go through quickly. Club Leon won the second leg of CONCACAF Champions League 1-0 to take a 3-1 aggregate win in the final on Sunday against LAFC. LAFC has now lost 2 CCL finals in club history. Also, kudos to LAFC getting there. I watched the one game, I think earlier in the week. I didn't watch the finals, but Leon's got a good team. I thought they looked very, very good.
They do. I don't know if everybody saw it, but Tillman talked before the first leg of it, and he was saying how there's really no tactics in Mexican soccer. They just play out of grit and energy and feistiness, which, listen, I'm a huge Mexican soccer fan. I like that style of play. But do not be fooled. There are tons of tactics going on in Mexican soccer. And a team like Leon is a tough team for LAFC to play against because LAFC plays a fast pace. They play with flair. They're kind of a Mexican-style team in a sense because that's what draws their fans in. So they were basically playing a team very similar to themselves. Now, Leon is an older franchise than them. They have some really high-quality players. And they knew exactly what they were doing. And part of the Mexican game is, can they get you riled up and thinking about the next tackle because you just got a cheap shot? Like there's a point to their craziness in a sense that the Mexican, the way they play, like it's not for nothing. They have a thought process if they're going to make a dirty tackle and get a yellow card. They're trying to wind players up. They're trying to get into your head as much as they are about the tactics of the game, but just can they get you off your game where you're worried about? I used to do it as a player. If I could get a coach or players worried about getting a hard tackle on me because I was such a dirty, hard tackler, then you're not thinking about how you beat my team. If you're only solely thinking about me, then you're missing parts of the game that allows my team to have advantages around the pitch. And I would do it on purpose. And there were certain coaches and teams that didn't want me. And I went to a different team as I was older. And the GM was a friend of mine. And he would told the coach, he's like, no, there's a method to his madness. Like he doesn't do anything without a thought process. I would get red cards on purpose to fire players up, to fire teams up, or to get players to play that normally wouldn't play because I'm playing, but they need to get into the game. They need to be on the field. Like to me, Mexican soccer, there is a method to the way their madness and how they play. So you
Yeah.
can't be fooled. And I agree, Leon is a good team, and I like LAFC. I think they play the best brand of soccer in Major League Soccer. If they're on, I try my hardest to catch their game because they have some really good players. They play free flowing soccer. They attack. They try to impress their will, impose their will on teams. I like the way they play. They just came against a team that was better than them. And then once you're down in those kind of games where you got a 2-game, and so we used to play them, and it was a 180-minute game. So once you're winning at halftime, you can change your tactical adjustments, and you can do, like, they just needed one goal and they knew it was over. They were going to get that 3-1 aggregate. So things change when you play those long 180-minute basically games.
MLS having the opportunity to play against different leagues and different teams and different style is also really good for the league and for players to get that exposure to the Mexican style of soccer. I think once NWSL continues to grow and some of these women's leagues like Liga MX starts to grow as well, we'll start to see those types of competitions. But CCL is a really good competition for MLS. And even though LAFC didn't win, I still think it was a good showing and just good for the league in general to continue to grow. The U20 men's national team lost to Uruguay 2-0 in the quarterfinals. However, those 2 goals were the only goals that they gave up in the entire tournament. San Jose Earthquakes' Cade Cowell had 3 goals throughout the entire tournament. Hasn't had a goal in MLS this season, so we will hopefully maybe see his progression from the Youth National Team World Cup come into MLS and see him bring that goal scoring to the Quakes. The U.S. Women's Youth National Team, the U20 Youth National Team, lost in the CONCACAF finals to Mexico this week as well. And then we switch over to MLS. Cincinnati is at the top of the Eastern Conference by a mile with 39 points. They will be taking on Vancouver Saturday night. St. Louis is at the top of the Western Conference with 28 points. They'll be playing FC Dallas tonight. And then Sunday night, they'll be playing LA Galaxy, who recently let their president and Chris Klein go. So that team is in some weird positions off the field, but they still have their head coach in Vanny. So how will things look different, and how will things look the same against St. Louis, who's looking pretty good right now? Yellow Penny, Scotty, I'm going to let you go first on this one. TST tournament in your backyard. You were there. Yeah. Tell us about it, and why is it Yellow Penny?
Okay, so first I went to the TST tournament. And I wouldn't say I was skeptical. I just, first one ever. My best friend was in town. His name is Tommy Tanner, and he owns, I'm wearing his shirt today, Utica City FC, which is an MASL indoor team. So when I go out to the tournament, and it'll be a little bit long on my yellow penny. And actually, Tommy Tanner played on the team where we did the yellow penny. So when he watches the show, he'll know what we're talking about for sure here. So I went out to the tournament, and it reminded me of being at the U.S. Open tennis tournament, whereas you get your ticket, you get into the tournament. So there was 2 stadium fields, which was amazing to be able to be in the stadiums. And they went across the field, half the field across the field, where the way the fields were set up in this 77 tournament. And then if you ever been at Wake Med Soccer Park, then you go down out of the stadium, and there's a little tiny stadium to the side where the teams practice, which has 2 full fields. Well, those fields were split up again. So then there was another 4 fields down. So there was a total of 6 fields. And you could walk free flow and go to any game you wanted to. You could sit in stands. The back fields really didn't have any stands. They did a really good job of making the groups, I would say, competitive for the groups. The team that won, Newtown, which is out of Connecticut, their group of 4, and then there was the group I'm pretty sure where the Canadian team came out of. Their 2 groups, they were the best 8 teams, I thought, in the whole entire tournament. It had Blades and Grass was in that tournament in those sections. So, like, with the Wrexham and the Como and the girls' national team, their group was a good group. They played pretty well against each other. But 2 of those teams probably would have never gotten out if they were in the other groups with the other players. But here is my yellow penny. The team that won, it was Newtown, and in the final, they played a Canadian team, and they had a total of 19 MASL players. This is the indoor league that's here in the United States. My problem is there are players that were playing in those finals that are good enough for the MLS. But here in the United States, so my yellow penny goes to the soccer teams, the big MLS teams. They're always looking at the Indianas, the Virginias, the Chapel Hills, the Penn State. You have to be a big school to be a good player. And what this tournament proved is there are tons and tons of talent floating around the United States. And we need to do a better job because Newtown won. They were by far the best team at the tournament. And it would have been a shame for them to lose. And they slowed the game down. They sped the game up. And we're going to get the people that come on and say, oh, but they knew how to sub and they knew the game of indoor. And they listen, soccer is soccer. Yes, there are slight adjustments always tactically based on size of field. Listen, you go into NYFC and you play in Yankee Stadium, you're going to make some tactical adjustments because it's really hard to play on a baseball field. Even though it's a square, the way the stands are set up, you get off on your angles because you play to the stands. Mm-hmm. It's just a weird thing. I played in a baseball stadium. So there's always tactical adjustments, turf to grass, to field turf, to real grass, to the length of the grass, to the heat, to all different things. There are players in this MASL, and people need to know there are really good players floating around the United States. Listen, we were at the game. My buddy was there. He was looking to sign players, looking to, to help his team get forward. But we were there, and Lindsay, what's her name? The old
Harris.
Chapel Hill. Harris.
Lindsay
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
She was amazing. Like, if I'm an NWSL team, I'm watching this. We're signing this. If I'm an indoor, I might sign. I might have the only female goalie on my team. But she was unbelievable. Like, they lost 12-0. They lost whatever the other scores were. And every game that they lost, she was the best player on the field. And they were like, she gave up 12 goals, and she was the best player on the field against Wrexham. It wasn't even close how good she was. They should have scored 100. But she saved 80-something shots. It was amazing.
Wasn't it like a 16-0 game? I'm pretty sure. And that's not her fault. Even Heather O'Reilly at the end was like, someone needs to draft her.
She was amazing. Yeah. There was just the physicality of the game was just a little bit too hard. But the girls, they said they got interviewed and they said, look, we're here to compete. We're not sure if we were going to do good or bad, but we were here to show little girls, like, if you have a dream, go for it. It's okay to fail, but not trying is not good enough. Like, you got to do it. So, like, their story was great. Listen, I thought the TST was phenomenal, and I think we got to see some really good soccer players and the whole time I was there, I was like, how is this guy how are people not looking at this player? Like, how do I not know about this player? Like, and I watch all kinds of soccer. Like I said, he owns the Utica City FC. And, like, I watched those games, and I was still, like, some of the players, like the last goal, the audacity to not shoot it when you should have hit it first time, to pull it back, to do a behind the back pass, to do a freeze and then a roll to touch it in. It's like, that was for $1 million. And these guys are like, they had the class and the audacity to be like, we're here to entertain. We're here to show you what we're all about. Like, for me, if I'm the MASL, I am replaying the entire tournament because there was a team out of San Diego that was the San Diego Sockers combined with the Mexican futsal national team. And I don't want to hear like, oh, they're futsal players, blah, blah, blah. Messi was a futsal player. Luis Suarez was a futsal player. Half of the Brazilian national team were futsal players. Like, that's just part of the learning curve. It makes you understand the game better. It makes you play faster. So for me is the yellow penny goes to all the people who think you have to look at specific only big colleges to find great players. Like, the best thing that happened to Breck Shea and them was that they lost in the semis because they would have got murdered in the finals against Newtown. And that is Breck Shea, Jeff Cameron, who just recently retired. So you can't say, oh, they're 30-something years old, blah, blah. Like, there's 30-something years old guys playing and yes, they're still playing. There's still guys playing all over. Casemiro's in his 30s. Ronaldo's 37. Messi's 35 or whatever he is. Like, there's a lot of older players with nutrition and the way we take care of our bodies now. Age is nothing but a number. So, like, these guys were destroying MLS players. Yeah. They showed their worth. And to me is like, we have to stop pigeonholing players. Like, if you didn't come out of this academy, if you didn't come from this club, you can't be any good. There are players playing all over the country, all over the world, and we need to do a better job in scouting to find the true talent because as fans, we deserve it. The LA Galaxy deserves a better product. We all deserve a better product.
Yeah, I mean, it also too, soccer in America isn't cheap. And if you don't come from the means to be able to play on a certain club that can get you to a certain college, doesn't mean you're not a good player. So it's like tournaments like these are not only fun and entertaining, but I think that's a really good perspective to have, that there's talent coming in, like the Lindsay Harris, to go for it. I was listening to Lynn Williams and Sam Mewis's podcast called Snacks. If you haven't listened to it, you have to give it a listen. They've got some really good guests on the show. One guest they had was Stephanie McCaffrey. She played on Heather O'Reilly's team, the U.S. team. And they were asking her about the TST tournament. And she was like, yeah, I mean, there's no way to come back from retirement than playing Premier League players, right? And I just thought she was hilarious. That podcast interview is super funny. Scotty, I think you specifically would really like it. Her perspective on the game and her life in general is really cool. I didn't really know about her autoimmune disease, which kind of made her have to stop playing. Now she's in the venture capitalist world. Really, really funny, really entertaining, but also really smart. So check that podcast out. My yellow penny for this week, I was having a hard time coming up with it, but it's Tuesday morning here, and the PGA Tour has announced they have agreed to merge with the Saudi-backed rival Live Golf. The deal will squash their pending litigation, and they will move forward as one. We do not know what they will be called. That will be announced later this week. However, didn't see this one coming. This one was not on my bingo card. I loved the rivalry. I thought it was fun, entertaining. We've got players at the PGA Tour. We've got players going for the money. Live Golf trying something different. Now they're back together as one, and it's not entertaining enough for me. Golf is a good sport. I enjoy playing it, but I need that like off the field drama, off the course drama to make it like, really entertaining. So yeah, I'm a little disappointed.
Maybe we'll get some drama because, McIlroy, Tiger Woods, they had some harsh things to say about the guys who jumped ship. So maybe, we'll see
maybe it'll be
swung around like, hey, maybe we'll get some fights on the tees. That'll be awesome.
Dude, what if they like started ripping their gloves off?
Bad things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really bad things about each other when it all happened. Like they, oh, they just did it for the money. They're not true golfers. Like, well, now you're going to be back together. Let's see how it goes.
Man, I wish I could like be in the clubhouse with them and hear those conversations. Some of the stuff we catch off like when they're doing the interviews and everything is really entertaining. But yeah, I would love like a tee box. What do you call it? Like when you hit it off, tee box, like a match, like they hit each other or they go for it or like exchange some words. Yeah, you're right. This has potential, but right now after the news broke, I'm going with Yellow Penny.
Yeah.
All right, Scotty. Yeah, no, we'll see. We'll see how it all goes. I want to see what the name is. My uncle, he said live or die, which I think could be fun. But yeah, that's what we might see. People are going to live or they're going to die through this one.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in this week. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok at SFTP Pod. And guys, start commenting. Leave us some reviews. Let us know what you think about our takes on stuff. We'd love to hear your takes. Shout out to our guy, Omar. He leaves us some really good reviews on our YouTube page. I love his comments and how he gets in the conversation. And that's what we want to do with you guys, is have a conversation with you. So make sure to leave us comments. Either that's on Apple Podcast or on YouTube or even on social media. We check it all. So make sure
maybe some of these MASL fans will start commenting now.
Yeah.
You comment on MASL. We'll talk about your league. I love indoor. Sure. Tony Miola played indoor. I played indoor. One of the best players I ever played with. Soccer alone played. Zoran Karic, one of the Preki played. Like, there's a lot of great players that come out of the indoor league. It's a fun league. If you have never seen indoor, you need to check it out because it is. The TST was pretty fast. Indoor's way faster than that league. Okay.
Yeah, well then go watch Indoor League and we'll be talking about it. You got to leave a comment though, because if you don't comment, I'm just kidding.
We don't know.
Well, we don't know you want to hear about it. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you guys back here next Wednesday.
Have a great week.